The sun hung low over the cracked asphalt of Route 17, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the dusty shoulder. A single figure stood there, small and unyielding against the vast emptiness of the desert highway, a girl no older than 8, her faded sundress clinging to her frame like a second skin dusted with the fine grit of endless miles. She clutched a crumpled piece of paper in her trembling hands, the edges worn from too many folds and unfolds. Her bare feet shifted uneasily on the hot ground, but her eyes, wide and shadowed by something far heavier than the fading light, fixed on the approaching rumble. It wasn't a cry for help that escaped her lips. It was a whisper, carried on the dry wind, as if she'd long ago learned that screams went unanswered. The convoy crested the rise like a thunderhead, rolling in from the horizon. 50 bikes in tight formation, their chrome gleaming under the amber sky, engines growling in unison like the heartbeat of some ancient beast. Leather vests patched with the emblem of the Iron Promise, a coiled serpent around a broken chain, flapped against the wind. At the lead rode Tom Hawk Daniels, his grizzled face etched with lines from battles fought and promises kept, his silver-streaked hair whipping back under the helmet. He'd seen too many roads like this one, too many ghosts lingering at the edges. The girl didn't flinch as the bike slowed, parting like a wave to encircle her without a word. Hawk killed his engine first, the sudden silence amplifying the distant hum of cicadas and the faint whistle of wind through the saguaros. She stepped forward, undeterred by the circle of hardened riders dismounting around her. Her voice, when it came, was steady but soft, like gravel under tires. "Sir, find my brother. He's been missing so long." She extended the paper. A faded photograph of a boy, maybe 12, with the same wide eyes and a grin that spoke of simpler days. The name scrawled beneath it in childish handwriting, Elias. No last name, no details, just a plea etched in pencil. Hawk took it gently, his calloused fingers brushing hers, and for a moment the world narrowed to that image. The girl's face mirrored the boy's, but hers carried the weight of years stolen. Nights alone in a trailer on the outskirts, whispers of neglect from neighbors who looked away, officials who'd filed reports only to let them gather dust in some forgotten drawer. Hawk's gaze lingered on the photo, the desert air thick with the scent of heated metal and sun-baked earth. Memories flooded back unbidden. A different road, decades ago, in the scorched sands of a far-off war zone. A young soldier, barely more than a kid, pressing a locket into his hand. "If I don't make it, Hawk, find my little brother back home. Promise me." The soldier hadn't made it, his body lost to the chaos, and Hawk had carried that vow like a scar across his chest. He'd searched after the war, knocking on doors in a dusty town much like this one. But the trail had gone cold. Life had pulled him into the Brotherhood of the Iron Promise, a crew of veterans and outcasts bound by oaths stronger than blood. They'd built something real, garages that fixed more than engines, rides that delivered justice where the law faltered. But that promise, it had festered, a quiet regret amid the roar of engines and the camaraderie of the open road. Now, staring at this girl, her name, she said, was Mia, Hawk felt the echo of that old oath stir. Elias. Missing for 3 years, she explained in halting words, since their mother passed and the system shuffled them like unwanted cards. Social services had promised help, but their visits grew sparse, records vague. "They said he'd run away," Mia murmured, her small fists clenching. "But he wouldn't. He said he'd always come back for me." The riders shifted uneasily, their boots crunching on the gravel, eyes flicking between their leader and the child. No one moved to dismiss her. In the Iron Promise, a plea like this wasn't just heard, it was answered. Hawk folded the photo carefully and tucked it into his vest pocket, right over his heart. He knelt to her level, the leather of his knees creaking, and placed a hand on her shoulder, gentle but firm as the desert rock. "We're gonna find him, Mia. You have my word. It wasn't bluster. It was the kind of promise that bound souls, the sort that had forged the club from broken men into a force of quiet reckoning. He straightened, pulling the radio from his belt, the static crackle cutting through the hush. All units, this is Hawk. Stand down the run to Tucson. We've got a priority. Elias boy, about 15 now, last seen in these parts 3 years back. Eyes like his sister's. Mobilize the network. Garages, contacts, every eye on the wire. The response came swift, a chorus of affirmatives rippling through the radios like a chain reaction. Engines roared back to life, not in aggression, but in purpose, bikes peeling off in pairs, heading to spread the word through the hidden veins of their world. One rider, a burly veteran named Jax with tattoos mapping old wounds, lingered to drape his jacket over Mia's shoulders. "Stay with us, kid. You're safe now." She nodded, clutching the edges like a shield, her eyes following the convoy as it dispersed into the twilight. Word spread like wildfire through the underbelly of the city. Mechanics in dimly lit shops paused mid-weld, their torches hissing out as they tuned into the encrypted channels. Truckers on the interstate rerouted, scanners alive with the call. Even the old-timers in the Veterans Hall, nursing coffees at dawn, perked up at the mention of a lost boy and a promise unpaid. By nightfall, the quiet town of Eldridge, usually content with its routines of diners and dusty main streets, felt the shift. Lights burned late in the sheriff's office, where a harried deputy sifted through archived files, the air heavy with the musty scent of paper and reluctance. Whispers reached the local news van, parked outside the courthouse, a reporter jotting notes on a pad. Biker gang mobilizing. Search for missing teen? Hawk rode back with Mia on the back of his bike, her arms wrapped tight around his waist, the wind whispering secrets through the canyons. The road ahead twisted like the path to redemption, fraught with shadows of corruption, the kind that hid children in plain sight, buried under red tape and indifference. He didn't know what they'd uncover. Signs of neglect in foster homes that masqueraded as care, or worse, trails leading to those who profited from the lost. But as the stars pricked the velvet sky, Hawk felt the weight lift, just a fraction. This wasn't vengeance, it was honor, the slow burn of a man making right what time had tried to erase. In the rear view, Mia's reflection showed a flicker of hope, fragile as the first light on the horizon. The Iron Promise wasn't just a club, it was a vow etched in chrome and loyalty, and tonight it rolled toward a truth long overdue. Wait, no, instructions say no word counts, so end narrative there. After the first paragraph, the base prompt says, "Appos aperto paragrapho," but doesn't specify what. Perhaps it's a call to action, but for English, maybe adapt. To be safe, since it's chapter 1 and output clean, I'll assume the narrative includes it if needed. But the instructions say clean narrative, so just the story. Looking back, the base has chamada obrigatorias, após a further paragrapho, but no detail. Perhaps it's a general hook. For now, proceed with narrative only. The headquarters of the Iron Promise loomed on the edge of Eldridge like a fortress forged from rusted steel and forgotten dreams. A sprawling compound of low-slung garages, chain-link fences etched with the desert's relentless bite, and the faint glow of neon signs flickering against the night. Hawk eased his bike through the open gates, the engine's low growl fading into the chorus of arriving riders, their machines lining up in precise rows under the floodlights. Mia clung to him, a moment longer than necessary, her small hands releasing only when he dismounted and lifted her down, her feet touching the gravel with a soft crunch. The air was cooler here, laced with the sharp tang of motor oil and the smoky residue of a recent bonfire, where club members gathered to share stories that bridged the gaps between wars and roads. Inside the main hall, the walls were a tapestry of patched leathers and framed photos, faded images of rides through canyons, Memorials to brothers lost, not to bullets, but to the slow erosion of time. Jax, the veteran with arms like knotted ropes, guided Mia to a worn couch piled with blankets, his voice a gravelly rumble. "Get some rest, kid. We've got eyes everywhere." She nodded, curling up with the jacket still draped over her, but her eyes followed Hawk as he moved to the long oak table at the center, where maps and laptops already sprawled like battle plans. The room filled quickly, 20, then 30 riders filtering in, their boots echoing on the concrete floor, faces shadowed by the harsh overhead bulbs that cast stark contrasts like scenes from an old noir film. Hawk spread the photo of Elias across the table, pinning it down with a heavy wrench. The boy's grin seemed almost defiant in the lamplight, a spark against the grim purpose gathering around it. 3 years, Hawk said, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a knife through fog. Social services lost the thread after their mom passed. Foster placements, 3, maybe 4. Last trace was a group home on the east side, but the records, they're ghosts. He tapped a finger on a printed email from one of their contacts, a retired caseworker who'd owed the club a favor since they'd pulled her son from a wreck 2 summers back. The words blurred in the low light. Vague transfers, a runaway report, stamped and shelved, no follow-up. The kind of indifference that turned lives into footnotes. Riders leaned in, the scent of leather and sweat mingling with the bitter brew of coffee from a pot simmering on the counter. Lena, the club's medic, a sharp-eyed woman with scars from her own tours overseas, scanned the details on her tablet. "I've got a line on the group home director. Quiet type, but whispers say he cuts corners. Kids come and go like inventory." Her fingers flew across the screen, pulling up satellite views of the facility, a squat building ringed by chain link, windows dark even at this hour. Bull, a massive figure with a beard streaked grey, grunted from the corner. "We ride at first light, door to door if we have to." But Hawk held up a hand, the lines around his eyes deepening. This wasn't a raid, it was a reckoning, delicate as threading a needle in the dark. One wrong move, and the shadows they'd stir could swallow the truth whole. As the meeting broke into smaller clusters, some plotting routes on the maps, others tapping into encrypted networks that spanned truck stops and back-alley diners, Hawk stepped outside for air. The desert night pressed in, stars sharp as shrapnel overhead, the distant howl of a coyote underscoring the isolation. He lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating the photo still tucked in his pocket, and let the old memory resurface fully. That soldier in the war zone, Kid they called him, though his name was Ramirez, had been barely 18, eyes wide like Elias's, pressing the locket with a family photo into Hawk's palm amid the whine of incoming fire. "My brother's back in Arizona. If I'm gone, don't let him fade away." Hawk had nodded, the promise sealed in the chaos, but returning stateside, the trail had unraveled. Parents gone, the boy shuffled into the system. He'd searched for months, knocking on doors that slammed shut, until the iron promise became his anchor, a way to honor vows through the brotherhood. But Elias's face now. It was Ramirez staring back, demanding the debt be paid. A soft footfall pulled him from the reverie. Mia, blanket trailing behind her like a cape, standing in the doorway with Jax hovering protectively. "Can't sleep?" Hawk asked, exhaling smoke away from her. She shook her head, eyes reflecting the ember's glow. "Elias used to tell stories about bikes like yours, said one day he'd ride one, take me away from everything." Her voice cracked on the last word, the weight of those everythings. Empty trailers, absent guardians, the hollow echo of unanswered knocks, hanging between them. Hawk stubbed out the cigarette, kneeling again to meet her gaze. "He will, Mia, or we'll bring him home so he can." It was more than words. It was the thread weaving her into the fabric of their chosen family, where loyalty wasn't inherited but earned in the quiet hours. By dawn, the compound buzzed with controlled energy. Scouts had already fanned out, 2 bikes heading to the group home under the guise of a parts delivery, others calling in favors from diner owners who'd seen strays passing through. The sheriff's office stirred too, a deputy named Reyes, fresh-faced and wary, fielding calls from concerned citizens as the bikers' network lit up the wires. He paced the linoleum-floored bullpen, fluorescent lights humming overhead, flipping through the dusty file on Elias, a photo clipped to the front, the same grin now faded to sepia. "Run away," the report claimed, but notes in the margins, scrawled by a long-gone investigator, hinted at unease. Boy mentioned bad hands at the last placement. No corroboration. Reyes hesitated, phone in hand, the morning sun slanting through blinds to stripe the room in gold and shadow. The Iron Promise's reputation preceded them, not as outlaws, but as the ones who fixed what the badge couldn't touch. A call from Hawk came through the switchboard. "We're not here to cause trouble, Deputy. Just answers." The first lead broke mid-morning, crackling over the radio, as Hawk led a tight formation toward the east side. Lena's voice, steady amid static. "Director's talking. Kid was there 2 years back. Troubled, they said. Transferred after an incident. Signs of unrest, but no details." Unrest. The word hung like dust in the air, evoking images of muffled cries and doors locked from the outside. Hawk's grip tightened on the handlebars, the road blurring beneath him, canyons rising like silent witnesses. They pulled up to a nondescript office building, the director, a slick man in a too-tight suit waiting on the steps, sweat beading despite the chill. His eyes darted as Hawk dismounted, the line of bikes idling behind like a wall of chrome judgment. I have records," he stammered, handing over a thin folder. Inside, transfer papers to a remote facility upstate, dated just after the incident. Elias's signature, shaky but there. But as they pored over it later, back at the compound with Mia watching from the sidelines, a discrepancy emerged. A date that didn't align with Mia's timeline, a guardian's name that rang false. Corruption's scent, faint but unmistakable, like oil seeping through cracked earth. Hawk felt the old scar tighten, the promise pulling him deeper into the web. This wasn't just finding a boy, it was unraveling the lies that let him vanish, proving that in a world of broken oaths, one man's word could still light the way. And now I invite you to leave in the comments, where you're watching from, and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments they reach you. The desert wind whipped through the canyons as Hawk's convoy carved a path northward, the bikes slicing the morning haze like blades through silk. Chrome caught the rising sun, flashing signals to the empty horizon, while the rumble of engines echoed off red rock walls, a steady pulse against the silence of the wilds. Mia rode pillion behind Lena, her small frame tucked against the medic's back, the borrowed jacket flapping like wings. The folder from the group home director lay strapped to Hawk's tank bag, its pages whispering secrets with every bump. Transfer records to Willow Creek facility, a state-run outpost buried in the hills, where troubled youth were sent to rehabilitate. But the dates lied, off by months, and the authorizing signature belonged to a social worker who'd retired under a cloud of quiet complaints. Corruption, Hawk knew, thrived in such shadows, feeding on the vulnerable like roots twisting through dry soil. They arrived at Willow Creek by midday, the facility materializing from the scrub like a forgotten outpost. Barbed wire topping cinder block walls, a single access road gated with rusted iron. Dust devils danced in the yard, carrying the faint, acrid scent of institutional bleach and overgrown weeds. Hawk signaled the group to halt at a respectful distance, engines idling low to avoid spooking the guards patrolling the perimeter. No dramatic entrance. The Iron Promise moved with the precision of men who'd learned that force alone meant nothing lasting. Jax dismounted first, his bulk casting a long shadow as he approached the gate, hands visible and empty. "We're here about a boy named Elias," he called out, voice carrying clear over the chain-link rattle. 15 now. Transferred in 2 years back. Family's looking." The guard, a lanky man with a uniform stretched thin over his frame, eyed them warily from the booth, radio crackling at his hip. Behind him the compound stirred, figures in drab attire glancing from barred windows, the distant clang of a metal door slamming shut. Minutes stretched like taffy under the relentless sun, sweat beading on brows, until a woman emerged from the admin building. Mid-40s, clipboard in hand, her face a mask of practiced neutrality. "Ms. Harlan," she introduced herself, the on-site coordinator, her heels clicking on the gravel as she unlocked the gate. "We don't get many visitors," she said, her tone laced with the edge of suspicion, eyes flicking over the line of bikes. "Elias? Yes, he was here briefly. But records are confidential." Hawk stepped forward, removing his helmet to reveal the weathered map of his face, lines etched deeper by the glare. He handed over the folder, the photo of the boy clipped to the front. "Not asking for secrets, ma'am, just truth." His sister's waiting, 8 years old, holding on to a promise he made her. Harlan's gaze softened a fraction at the mention of the girl, but her fingers tightened on the clipboard. Inside, the air-conditioned office hummed with the whir of fans and the rustle of filing cabinets, walls papered in faded posters of smiling teens in therapy circles. She pored over the documents, her lips pursing as discrepancies surfaced, the transfer date mismatched, the intake form stamped by a name not on staff. "This doesn't add up," she murmured, more to herself than them. "We had an audit last year. Irregularities. But the boy? He left after a few months. Behavioral issues, they said, placed elsewhere." "Elsewhere where?" Lena pressed gently from the doorway, her medic's bag slung over one shoulder, a subtle reminder of the lives they'd mended without fanfare. Harlan hesitated, the room's fluorescent buzz amplifying the pause, shadows playing across her face like doubts flickering to life. Finally, she pulled a drawer, extracting a sealed envelope, yellowed, unopened. "This came for him while he was here. Returned to sender, but no address, from a JR. Could be family." Hawk took it carefully, the paper crackling under his touch, postmarked from a town 2 states over. Inside, a single note in block letters. "Hold on, kid. Help's coming." No signature, but the handwriting tugged at something in Hawk's memory. Familiar, like echoes from barracks' scrawled letters. As they pieced it together outside, the group clustered under a lone mesquite tree, its branches offering scant shade against the climbing heat. Bull unfolded a state map across a bike seat, marking Willow Creek with a grease pencil. J.R. could be the soldier's kin. Ramirez had a cousin by that initial, ran a repair shop down south. The pieces slotted unevenly. Elias's incident at the group home, aligning with whispers of a whistleblower kid spotting something amiss. Funds siphoned for programs that never materialized. Kids shuffled to cut costs. Harlan, cornered by the evidence, admitted under Lena's steady gaze that audits had been buried, higher-ups protecting their own. "It's not just neglect," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder at the guards now watching too closely. "There's a network, placements for profit, records altered to hide it." Hawk felt the old promise coil tighter in his chest, Ramirez's locket a phantom weight against his skin. He'd failed that boy once, letting the system's inertia bury the search. But here was redemption's thread, Elias as the bridge between past ghosts and present oaths. He radioed the compound, deep in the dig, cross-reference JR with old military roles, and get Mia on a secure line. She might recognize the writing. The response crackled back from Jax's second-in-command, a voice steady as rebar. "On it, boss. Network's lighting up." Truckers spotted a kid matching the description hitching near the border last month. The revelation hit like a sudden downpour, cooling the baked earth but stirring mud underfoot. Elias wasn't just missing, he was running, piecing together his own escape from the web that ensnared him. Hawk mounted up, the envelope tucked safe as the convoy reformed. But as they rolled out, a black SUV crested the hill behind them, unmarked, windows tinted, trailing at a distance that screamed surveillance. Corruption didn't yield quietly. It circled, waiting for weakness. Hawk glanced back, the sun glinting off the vehicle's grille like bared teeth. The road ahead forked toward the borderlands, where truths hid in arroyos and loyalties were tested by fire. Back at the compound that evening, Mia sat cross-legged on the hall floor, the notes spread before her, under the warm glow of a hanging lamp. Her fingers traced the letters, eyes narrowing in recognition. "It's his," she said softly, voice cutting the hum of strategizing voices around her. "Elias wrote like this, taught me in secret when the lights were out." The room fell hushed. The weight of her words binding them closer, a chosen family forging links from fragile paper. Hawk watched her, the flicker of hope in her eyes mirroring the spark in his own soul. This promise, once a burden, now burned bright, a beacon against the encroaching dark. Yet as night deepened, the SUV's shadow loomed in reports from scouts, circling the outskirts. Queries hitting databases with the sheriff's office. Deputy Reyes, back in Eldridge, fielded a call from an anonymous tip line, his desk lamp pooling light on the Elias file, now cracked open wider. "Bikers stirring things," the voice hissed, laced with warning. Reyes hung up, rubbing his temples, the moral tug-of-war etching lines on his young face. The iron promise pressed on, not with guns, but with the unyielding force of honor, unraveling threads that bound the lost. In the quiet hours, Hawk stood alone on the compound roof, stars wheeling overhead, the desert's breath cool on his skin. Redemption wasn't a destination. It was the ride itself, carrying them toward a boy who waited and a vow that refused to die. The borderlands stretched like a scarred canvas under the relentless midday sun, arroyos carving jagged wounds into the earth, where creosote bushes clawed at the sky, and the air shimmered with heat haze. Hawk led the pared-down convoy, 8 bikes now, lean and purposeful, along a rutted dirt track that paralleled the unseen line dividing states, dust plumes rising like signals from ancient riders. The envelope from Willow Creek rode secure in his vest, its cryptic note a talisman against the growing unease. Mia had stayed back at the compound with Lena's watchful eye, her recognition of Elias's handwriting fueling the fire. But the weight of her trust pressed on Hawk like an extra passenger. Surveillance had thickened overnight. That unmarked SUV now tailed at intervals, vanishing behind ridges only to reappear, a black spectre in the rearview mirrors. They pulled into a ramshackle truck stop on the fringe of nowhere, the kind of place where semis idled like weary beasts and the diner served coffee, black as midnight. The scent of diesel and frying onions hung heavy, mingling with the faint metallic tang of chain-link fences baking in the heat. Jax killed his engine first, nodding toward a grizzled trucker wiping grease from his hands at the pumps. "Old man Harlan. Lena's contact said he's seen strays moving through here, heading south to dodge the patrols." Hawk dismounted, boots crunching on gravel scattered with cigarette butts, and approached with measured steps, the photo of Elias extended like a passport. The trucker's eyes, weathered by decades on the haul, narrowed at the image, then flicked to the line of bikes. "Kid like that? Yeah, hitched a ride last spring. Quiet one, carried a backpack like it held his whole world. Dropped him at the river crossing, said he was chasing family." The words landed like stones in still water rippling out. Elias, running not from fear alone, but towards something. A lead on their mother's old ties, perhaps, or whispers of a relative who'd vanished into the same system years before. Hawk thanked the man with a firm handshake, the calluses speaking volumes without words, and the group reconvened at a scarred picnic table under the diner's awning. Bull unfolded the map again, his thick finger tracing a route along the river. Shallow crossings hidden by willows, paths used by those evading more than borders. If he's looping back, could be holing up in the old mission ruins. Scouts say it's a haven for runaways, shelter without questions. But the SUV circled the lot's edge, slowing just enough to register faces before accelerating away, its engine a low snarl swallowed by the highway's roar. Back on the move, the canyon walls closed in, red rock glowing like embers as the sun dipped toward afternoon. Hawk's mind churned with the old promise, Ramirez's locket a ghost against his chest. How the soldier's brother had slipped through cracks much like these, lost to foster drifts and indifferent hands. This web felt larger now. Threads connecting group homes to state facilities, profits skimmed from the forgotten. A radio crackle broke the rhythm. Deputy Reyes's voice, hesitant but edged with resolve. "Hawk, it's me. Dug deeper on that social worker's name. Falsified stamps, kickbacks to a private outfit handling placements. They're the ones burying files. And your boy's trail? It crosses into their territory up ahead. Watch your backs. I've got heat from above." The warning hung as they crested a rise, the river glinting below like a silver vein through the valley. The mission ruins emerged, a cluster of adobe shells half swallowed by sand, bells silent in the bell tower, vines twisting through cracked walls like veins of forgotten faith. They dismounted in the shadow of a crumbling arch, the air cooler here, laced with the damp earthiness of the water and the faint herbal whisper of sagebrush. No overt signs of life, but boot prints scarred the soft soil near the riverbank, fresh enough to suggest recent passage. Jax fanned out with two others, their steps silent on the packed dirt, while Hawk and Bull approached the main structure, a low-roofed nave where sunlight slanted through gaps like spotlights in an abandoned theater. Inside, the air was still, dust motes dancing in the beams, the scent of aged stone and hidden campfires lingering. A makeshift shelter caught Hawk's eye, blankets piled in a corner, a water jug half empty beside a scattering of canned goods. Amid the debris, a scrap of paper fluttered from a breeze through the cracks, a torn map fragment marked with a shaky arrow pointing north, back toward Eldridge. Elias had been here, planning a return, but something had pulled him off course. Bull knelt, retrieving a small item from the dust, a tarnished bracelet, links etched with initials, E.R. "Ramirez," Hawk breathed, the connection snapping like a lock tumbler. Elias wasn't just a lost boy. He was the thread to that long-buried vow, perhaps the soldier's kin, shuffled through the same indifferent machine. The realization sharpened the air as they emerged, but the idol shattered with the crunch of tires on the approach road. The SUV barreled into view, doors flinging open to disgorge three figures in plain clothes, badges glinting subtly, faces hard with the authority of those protecting secrets. "Stand down!" the lead one barked, hand hovering near his hip, eyes scanning the ruins like a hawk sighting prey. "This is restricted. You're trespassing on an active investigation." Hawk faced them squarely, the photo and envelope in hand, his voice steady as canyon stone. "Investigation or cover-up? We've got records showing falsified transfers, kids like Elias vanishing into your placements. His sister's waiting, 8 years old, clinging to a brother's word." Tension coiled like a spring, the river's murmur the only underscore, shadows lengthening as the sun arced lower. The men exchanged glances, one radioing for backup. But Reyes's earlier tip had bought them moments, the deputy stalling from Eldridge with procedural queries. No drawn weapons, no charges yet. This was the dance of power, where moral weight tipped the scales. "We're not leaving without answers," Hawk said. the Iron Promise riders forming a loose circle, not aggressive but unyielding, leather creaking softly in the breeze. The lead agent's jaw tightened, a flicker of doubt crossing his features, perhaps a conscience stirring under the uniform, or the fear of exposure rippling through ranks. As the standoff stretched, a distant engine hum grew, reinforcements from the club, closing the net without a shot fired. The agents retreated to their vehicle, tires spinning dust as they peeled away. But not before the leader tossed a parting shot. "This isn't over. Stay out of it, or you'll bury more than promises." Hawk watched them go, the adrenaline ebbing into resolve, the bracelet heavy in his palm. Back at the bikes, the group mounted up, the path ahead clearer yet fraught, Elias's arrow pointing home, but the web tightening around them. In the fading light, Hawk felt the redemption pull stronger, a quiet force binding past to present, honor against the tide of corruption. The ride back would carry them through twilight's veil, toward truths that demanded sacrifice, and a family forged in the fire of kept words. If this story of quiet courage and unbreakable promises is touching your heart, hit that like button now. It helps spread these tales of redemption to those who need them most. Twilight bled into the canyons as the convoy retraced its path from the mission ruins, the bikes humming a low dirge against the cooling air. Hawk rode point, the tarnished bracelet from Elias's camp glinting on his handlebar like a makeshift compass. Its initials, ER, a silent accusation against the fading light. Dust settled in their wake, but the unmarked SUV's threat lingered, a shadow that twisted the road ahead into something more labyrinthine than the arroyos themselves. The river's murmur faded behind them, replaced by the whisper of wind through Joshua trees, their twisted limbs reaching like supplicants under the emerging stars. Jax flanked Hawk's left, his radio clipped to his vest, crackling sporadically with updates from the compound. Scouts confirming the SUV's plates traced to a private security firm tied to state contracts, faceless entities that profited from the very placements they were unraveling. Back in Eldridge, the compound's floodlights cut the night like search beacons, casting the gravel yard in stark relief. Mia waited on the porch steps, her small figure silhouetted against the warm spill from the open door, Lena's arm around her shoulders. The girl's eyes lit up as Hawk dismounted, the bracelet extended in his palm, a relic that bridged her world to the one Elias had fled. "He was there," Hawk said, voice roughened by the day's grit, kneeling to her level. She touched it tentatively, fingers tracing the etched letters, a spark of recognition igniting in her gaze. "Elias wore this always. Said it was from family before everything." The word family hung heavy, evoking not blood but the patchwork of bonds the Iron Promise embodied. Veterans like Bull, who nodded solemnly from the shadows, his own scars hidden under ink and leather. Inside the hall, the air thickened with the aroma of reheated stew and fresh coffee, the long table now a war room of scattered notes and glowing screens. Riders gathered, faces illuminated by laptop light, the hum of fans underscoring the gravity. Hawk laid out the finds, the map fragment pointing homeward, the note's handwriting confirmed by Mia, and the bracelet linking back to Ramirez, the soldier whose locket still weighed on Hawk's conscience. "Elias is Ramirez's nephew," he explained, the pieces slotting with a clarity that bordered on pain. "Shuffled through the same system that swallowed his uncle's memory. He's not just running, he's fighting to remember." Lena cross-referenced the initials with old military archives accessed through a veterans network, her tablet screen flickering, discharge papers for a cousin, J.R., who'd vanished after the war, leaving Elias's mother to face the void alone. But the web tightened as reports filtered in. Deputy Reyes called from his office, the background clatter of keyboards and ringing phones painting a picture of bureaucratic frenzy. "They're circling the wagons," he said, voice low as if walls had ears. That firm, contracts for transporting kids, foster shuttles they call them. But logs show gaps, boys like Elias vanishing mid-route, no sign-ins at destinations. I've got a whistleblower in transport, willing to talk if you provide cover. Hawk's jaw set, the moral dilemma etching deeper lines. The risk of pulling Reyes deeper into the fray, a young man torn between badge and conscience. "We'll ride to you at dawn," Hawk replied. "Keep that file open. Truth's a slow burn, but it doesn't lie." Night deepened, the compound settling into watchful quiet. Hawk stepped out to the fire pit, embers glowing like distant campfires from his war days, the scent of burning mesquite curling into the starlit sky. Mia joined him, blanket wrapped tight, her presence a quiet anchor. "Why help us?" she asked, voice small against the crackle. Hawk stared into the flames, Ramirez's promise resurfacing, the whine of mortars, a young hand pressing metal into his. "Because some words outlast the storms. Your brother's carrying one, to come back for you. Mine's to make sure he can." She nodded, leaning against his arm, the simple act weaving her into the club's tapestry, where loyalty was the mortar holding fractured stones. Dawn broke with a vengeance, the sun igniting the horizon in fiery strokes as the convoy assembled, 15 strong now, engines idling like impatient guardians. They rolled into Eldridge, under a veil of mist rising from the dew-kissed fields, the town's main street stirring with early risers glancing from diner windows, coffee mugs paused mid-sip. The sheriff's office squatted at the corner, its facade weathered like the secrets it housed, fluorescent lights buzzing through the blinds. Hawk led them to the side lot, dismounting with purposeful calm, the group forming a respectful perimeter, no blockade, just presence. Reyes emerged, file under arm, his uniform crisp, but eyes shadowed by a sleepless night. "This way," he murmured, guiding them to a back room where the air smelled of stale ink and tension. The whistleblower waited, a wiry driver named Torres, hands fidgeting with a frayed cap, his face lined from years hauling more than cargo. "I drove the routes," he began, voice barely above the hum of the AC unit. "Kids loaded up, sedated sometimes to keep 'em quiet. Elias? I remember him, 15, scared but sharp. Handed him off at a depot near the border, but the receiving crew. They weren't official. Private van, no paperwork. Said he caused a scene, fought back. After that, gone, like the others." His words painted scenes in Hawk's mind, dim depots under sodium lights, muffled protests echoing off concrete, the indifferent churn of a machine grinding hopes to dust. Torres slid over a logbook photocopy, entries crossed out in haste. Coordinates pointing to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts, a way station in the shadow economy of lost children. Reyes paced, the linoleum creaking under his boots, conflict warring on his features. "This implicates half the department's oversight. If it leaks..." Hawk placed a hand on his shoulder, steady as an anchor. "It won't break you. We'll shield it. Network of eyes, not headlines. Justice isn't a spotlight, it's the quiet fix." The deputy nodded, resolve hardening, as the group absorbed the lead. Bull marked the warehouse on the map, his growl low. "We go tonight. No lights, no noise." But as they filed out, a patrol car idled across the street, engine purring suspiciously, the web's tendrils reaching even here. The ride to the warehouse unfolded under a moonless sky. The convoy ghosting through back roads lined with cottonwoods, their leaves rustling like whispered warnings. The structure loomed isolated, a hulking skeleton of corrugated metal and shattered windows, weeds thrusting through cracked lots like defiant fingers. They cut engines a quarter-mile out, proceeding on foot, boots silent on the sandy soil. The air heavy with the brine of a nearby dry wash. Hawk signaled splits, Jacks and 2 others circling the perimeter, Lena prepping a med kit in the shadows. Inside, the darkness swallowed them, beams from muted flashlights cutting swaths through dust-laden air, revealing stacks of forgotten crates and faded manifests yellowed with age. A low murmur from the far corner halted them, voices, clipped and urgent, filtering through a rusted door. Hawk crept closer, the scent of damp concrete and rust filling his nostrils, heart pounding with the rhythm of old patrols. Peering through a gap, he glimpsed two figures, suits like the SUV agents, poring over ledgers by lantern light, mentions of shipments and clean records slicing the quiet. Elias's name surfaced, tied to a recent relocation. Not escape, but capture, funneled deeper into the network after his mission run. One agent pocketed a drive, the glint of data that could topple the operation. The confrontation brewed swift. Jax's team breached from the rear, a distraction of rattling chains drawing the guards out. Hawk moved in, voice low but ironclad. "We're taking what's ours, the truth." No fists flew. The Iron Promises code held violence at bay, leveraging moral weight instead. The agents froze, hands raised, as Lena documented the scene with her phone, Reyes's earlier tip ensuring a digital trail. "This ends," Hawk said, securing the drive, "for the kids you've erased." Doubt flickered in their eyes, cracks in the facade as sirens wailed distant. The standoff dissolving into hurried retreat. Back under the stars, the convoy reformed, the drive's contents promising coordinates to Elias's last known holdout, a safe house run by sympathetic outcasts. Hawk felt the promise crest, redemption's horizon breaking, but the cost loomed. Alliances tested, shadows pursuing. As engines roared to life, the desert night enveloped them, carrying forward the unyielding march of honor. The first hints of dawn painted the desert horizon in bruised purples and golds, the convoy slicing through the pre-light chill like shadows given form. Hawk gripped the handlebars tighter, the USB drive from the warehouse burning a hole in his vest pocket, its digital secrets a fragile key to Elias's trail. The air rushed cool against his face, carrying the faint mineral bite of dew on sagebrush and the underlying grit of roads, untraveled by day. Jax rode close on his flank, the two of them leading the core group, 7 bikes now, the others peeled off to maintain watch on the retreating agents, engines murmuring low to avoid drawing eyes from the sparse farmsteads dotting the fringes. The safe house coordinates blinked in Hawk's mind. A derelict cabin tucked into a fold of the hills, run by a loose alliance of former foster runaways who'd carved out a haven from the system's discards. No fanfare, just survival etched in weathered wood and unspoken codes. They crested the final rise as the sun breached the ridges, flooding the valley in a wash of amber that turned the cabin's tin roof to molten fire. Nestled against a sheer rock face, the structure blended into the landscape, camouflaged by tangled scrub and a dry creek bed that whispered over pebbles like guarded secrets. Smoke curled lazily from a stone chimney, the scent of burning piñon wood drifting on the breeze, mingling with the earthy dampness of hidden springs. Hawk signaled a halt at the tree line, dismounting with the fluid grace of a man who'd navigated worse ambushes. The group fanned out instinctively, boots soft on the loamy soil, eyes scanning for traps amid the wildflowers nodding in the morning gusts. No overt threats, but the air hummed with caution, the distant call of a raven underscoring the isolation. A figure emerged from the cabin's shadowed porch, lean and watchful, mid-30s, with a ponytail streaked grey from early hardships and a shotgun slung casual over one shoulder, more prop than promise. She was Carla, the unofficial guardian of this outpost, her face a map of quiet defiance, eyes sharp as flint under the brim of a faded cap. "Iron Promise," she said, recognizing the patches without surprise, her voice carrying the lilt of border towns. "Heard your rumble last night, figured you'd show." Hawk stepped forward, helmet tucked under arm, the bracelet and photo extended like credentials. Elias, boy, 15, his sister's counting on us. Carla's gaze softened at the image, but her posture held firm, the porchboards creaking under her shift. She nodded toward the door, the scent of strong tea and cornbread wafting out, a domestic anchor in the wilds. Inside, the cabin unfolded like a hidden sanctuary, walls lined with salvaged shelves of books and canned supplies, a pot-belly stove casting flickering warmth across mismatched chairs. Sunlight slanted through calico curtains, dusting motes in golden haze, while the low hum of a generator provided faint power to a single bulb. 3 others waited, 2 young men patching a radio in the corner, their hands scarred from labors unspoken, and a girl no older than Mia, braiding her hair by the window, her eyes holding the same haunted clarity. Carla poured mugs from the enamel pot, steam rising like morning fog. Elias was here 3 weeks back, she confirmed, settling into a rocker that groaned in protest. Came in ragged, talking about a depot run gone wrong. Fought off hands that weren't meant to touch, said he had a sister, a promise to loop home. We patched him, fed him stories of roads that lead out. Hawk leaned against the rough-hewn table, the wood's grain worn smooth by countless counsels, absorbing her words like parched earth taking rain. The drive's data corroborated. Elias's relocation had been a snatch by the private firm, a brief escape landing him here before they closed in again. "Where'd he go?" Jax asked, his bulk filling the doorway, casting a long shadow that danced with the fire's play. Carla hesitated, glancing at the girl by the window, her name Lily whispered later, who nodded subtly. Northwest, toward the old rail yards. Had a tip from a contact, JRE, same as your note, said the man's kin, running a scrap operation that hides more than metal, but they followed him, suits like the ones sniffing around last week. The revelation twisted the knot in Hawk's gut. JR, Ramirez's cousin, the missing link in a chain of lost boys, pulling Elias deeper into the fray. As details spilled, sketches of routes on a napkin, warnings of patrols doubling near the yards, the cabin filled with the group's quiet resolve, the air thickening with the aroma of rising dough, and the subtle undercurrent of fear turned to fuel. Lena, ever the healer, knelt by Lily, checking a fading bruise with gentle hands, her medic's touch a bridge to trust. "You're building something here," Hawk observed, voice low as thunder rolling distant. Carla met his eyes, the lines around hers crinkling. "Family's what you fight for, not what they assign. Elias got that, left us this." She slid over a worn journal, pages filled with Elias's scrawl, sketches of bikes, notes on safe crossings, a repeated mantra, "For Mia always," etched like a vow on every margin. Outside, the sun climbed higher, baking the earth into a shimmering haze, but the idyll fractured with a low engine growl echoing from the valley floor. The SUV, or one like it, crested the opposite ridge, kicking up dust like a warning flag, its path deliberate toward the cabin. Hawk's radio crackled, Bull's voice from the perimeter terse. "Company, 3 vehicles, armed shadows." No panic, the iron promise moved as one. Carla's crew melting into prepared hides, trapdoors under floorboards, overlooks in the rocks. Hawk positioned Mia's phantom presence in his mind, her trust a shield against the encroaching threat. This wasn't just rescue. It was dismantling the machine, piece by rusted piece, for every child it had chewed through. The standoff unfolded in the clearing, bikes forming a loose barrier as the vehicles halted, doors opening to reveal agents in tactical vests, weapons holstered but ready, faces masks of enforced duty. The lead, a broad-shouldered man with a jaw like carved granite, stepped forward, badge catching the light. "Stand down. The boy Elias is under protective custody. Your interference ends here." Hawk faced him across the sun-scorched ground, the heat rising in waves that blurred the lines between ally and adversary. "Custody? or commodity. We've got logs, drives, witnesses. The systems profit off kids like him, falsified trails, buried cries, his sister's 8 waiting on a brother's word. You gonna tell her it's protected? The agent's eyes flickered. A crack in the armor. Perhaps a father himself, or a man we dared of the lies he enforced. Wind stirred the dust between them, carrying the faint, acrid whiff of exhaust and tension. No shots rang out. Instead, a radio exchange from the agent's side. Urgent whispers filtering through. Reyes's influence, Hawk suspected, stalling from Eldridge with escalating queries on their ops. Carla emerged from the cabin, journal in hand, her voice steady as she read aloud Elias's entries. Testimonies of shuffled nights, hands that grabbed too hard, promises whispered in the dark. The words hung in the air, moral gravity pulling at the standoff. Agents shifting uneasily as Lena filmed discreetly from the porch. Minutes stretched, the sun beating down like judgment, until the lead agent lowered his gaze, signaling retreat. This goes higher, but take the road west. Yards are clear for now. It wasn't surrender, but a fracture. Conscience overriding orders, a thread of humanity in the web. As the vehicles reversed, dust swirling in retreat, Hawk felt the promise swell. Ramirez's ghost nodding from the shadows. Elias was close, the yards a final gauntlet, where redemption waited not in glory, but in the quiet fulfillment of words long carried. The convoy mounted up, the cabin shrinking in the mirrors as they veered west, the journal strapped secure. Hills rolled by, dotted with yucca blooms like silent sentinels, the air alive with the hum of purpose. Back at the compound, word would spread, Mia hearing of her brother's fight, the chosen family expanding to include Carla's crew. But for Hawk, the ride was introspection's forge, scars of old wars mending in the heat of this new one. Honor wasn't a destination, it was the unbreaking line drawing them home. The old rail yard sprawled like the skeleton of forgotten industry, rusted tracks weaving through tumbleweeds and chain-link ghosts under the relentless afternoon sun. Hawk's convoy eased into the periphery, engines throttled to a whisper, the metallic tang of oxidized iron mingling with the dry, resinous bite of creosote ties baking in the heat. Shadows stretched long across the gravel, where derelict boxcars huddled like weary sentinels, their graffiti-scarred sides whispering tales of transients who'd passed through seeking solace or escape. The journal from Carla's cabin rode in Hawk's tank bag, its pages a roadmap of Elias's desperation, sketches of these very yards, notes on hidden bunkers beneath the loading platforms, a brother's vow etched in hurried ink. Mia, hold the line, I'm coming. They dismounted in the lee of a sagging water tower, boots grinding softly on cinders that crunched like brittle bones. Jax scanned the horizon through binoculars, the lenses glinting as he swept for movement amid the skeletal cranes looming overhead. Quiet as a grave, he muttered, the wind carrying his words laced with caution. Lena adjusted her medkit, her eyes sharp on the faint wisps of smoke curling from a distant embankment, campfire or signal. Bull flanked the group, his massive frame a reassuring bulk, while the others fanned out in pairs, shadows merging with the yard's labyrinthine decay. Hawk felt the weight of the bracelet in his pocket, Iara's initials a talisman pulsing against his thigh. Ramirez's old promise now intertwined with this one, a double helix of redemption pulling him forward. The air hummed with tension, the distant screech of a loose rail vibrating through the ground like a warning tremor. They moved toward the smoke, skirting puddles of oily runoff that iridesced in the sunlight, the scent sharpening to diesel and charred wood. Beneath a collapsed loading dock, the bunker revealed itself, a camouflaged hatch half buried in debris, padlocked but pried at the edges, fresh scratches gleaming like accusations. Hawk knelt, calloused fingers tracing the marks, his breath steady despite the coil in his gut. "He's close," he said, voice low as the rustle of wind through chain link. With a nod from Jax, Bull applied leverage. the lock giving way with a metallic snap that echoed too loudly in the hush. Inside, the bunker unfolded into dim coolness, walls of corrugated tin dripping condensation, the air thick with the musty damp of earth and unwashed desperation. Flashlights pierced the gloom, revealing a makeshift camp, bedrolls strewn across concrete, a lantern flickering on a crate serving as a table, scattered tools, and a half-eaten ration bar. In the corner, huddled against the wall with a blanket drawn tight, sat Elias, 15 now, but looking smaller, his frame wiry from months on the run, eyes wide with the wariness of one who'd learned trust was a luxury. Dirt streaked his face, mirroring the photo's grin now hardened into resolve. The same wide eyes as Mia's, locking onto the intruders with a mix of fear and defiance. Hawk froze, the beam of his light steady on the boy, Ramirez's locket materializing in his mind like a long-buried artifact. "Elias," he said softly, killing the light to let the lantern's glow soften the edges. The boy tensed, scrambling back, but Jax blocked the exit gently, hands raised. "Easy. We're not them. Your sisters sent us. Mia. She's safe, waiting." The name shattered something. Elias's shoulders sagged, tears carving clean tracks through the grime. "Mia. They said she was gone too, the suits, the vans. I fought, but—" His voice cracked, words tumbling out in fragments. The depot snatch, the private firm's grip, falsified escapes to cover their tracks, JR's scrapyard, a brief refuge before the net closed again. The journal was his, left as a breadcrumb, a silent cry for the family he'd sworn to reclaim. Hawk knelt, pulling the bracelet from his pocket and extending it. She recognized this, said you'd never leave it behind. Elias took it, fingers trembling as he clasped it around his wrist, the metal cool against fevered skin. No dramatic embrace, just the quiet click of closure, honor's thread weaving through the shadows. Lena moved in, checking for signs of hardship, bruises fading to yellow, exhaustion etched in hollow cheeks, but her touch was that of a sister, not an interrogator. "You're coming home," she murmured, the words a balm in the dimness. Outside, the group formed a protective ring, radios silent but vigilant, the yard's vast emptiness now a sanctuary rather than a snare. But the web's final twitch came swift. Engines growled from the east gate, the SUV flanked by 2 more vehicles. Tires churning gravel as they barreled toward the bunker. Agents spilled out, vests bulging with authority, the lead from the cabin standoff barking orders into a radio. "Secure the asset! No witnesses!" Hawk emerged first, Elias shielded behind him, the boy clutching the journal like a shield. The sun beat down, turning the yard into a furnace, heat waves distorting the standoff into a mirage of confrontation. "Asset?" Hawk echoed, voice carrying like gravel under tires. "He's a kid with a sister. Your system buried him for profit, falsified logs, buried files. We've got the drive, the testimonies. This ends now." The agents advanced, but Reyes's voice crackled over the shared channel. Amplified from Eldridge, "Stand down. Warrants incoming. States opening the books. Your ops are exposed." The deputy's gamble had paid off, his moral pivot tipping the scales. Anonymous tips from Torres and Carla flooding lines higher up. Doubt rippled through the ranks. One agent lowered his weapon, eyes flicking to Elias's haunted face, the human cost piercing the facade. No shots fired, no charges pressed in the dust. The lead agent's radio spat surrender, vehicles retreating in a plume of defeat, tails between legs as the horizon swallowed them. As the convoy reformed, Elias mounted behind Hawk, arms tentative around his waist, the boy's first tentative trust blooming in the wind-whipped ride back. The desert blurred by, canyons yielding to open plains, the air alive with the promise of reunion. At the compound, Mia waited on the steps, her small form bolting forward as the gate swung wide, engines fading to silence. Brother and sister collided in a tangle of limbs and whispers, the bracelet glinting as they clung, tears mingling with dust. The iron promise watched from the shadows, Jax clapping Hawk's shoulder, Lena smiling through unshed emotion, Bull nodding like a sentinel. This was family chosen, forged in the crucible of kept words, corruption's chains broken not by force, but by unyielding integrity. Hawk stood apart, the locket's weight lifting at last. Ramirez's vow fulfilled through Elias, a nephew's face closing the circle. Redemption wasn't thunderous. It was this quiet dawn. Promises, surviving the storms, honor's legacy riding eternal on the open road. The sun crested fully, bathing the yard in gold, as the brotherhood encircled the siblings, a circle unbreakable. Thank you for riding along on this journey of promises kept and families forged in the fire of loyalty. If these stories of quiet courage touch your soul, subscribe now for more tales that remind us honor endures.